This is one of the new people they're trying out, the Department of Defense. Sabrina Singh is her name. Asked by a reporter here about if the IDF had provided the Biden administration with literally any plan to protect civilians ahead of its pending ground invasion of Rafah, where over 1 million Palestinians have fled and have nowhere left to go. They're bombing Rafah still, regardless. People dying in their tents, children's heads exploding. But a ground invasion would be just another escalation in this slaughter. Here is the response where basically they admit that there was no plan provided.
Has the IDF provided any plans to DoD about for its plan to protect civilians ahead of any kind of ground invasion?
I'm not aware of any plan fully presented to the United States to review. Again, we're not asking to check their homework. What we're asking them to do is put forward a credible plan that they will be able to, as we have said in many conversations, protect the over 1 million innocent Palestinians that are there. And of course, any credible plan would have to take into account food, medicine, services. How are you going to provide those as you move a population? I know that's something that they're working through. The secretary, of course, remains engaged with Minister Gallant, not just at his level, but levels here at this building and throughout the interagency, but I'm just not going to get ahead of any plans that Israel's working on right now.
He has not seen that plan yet.
No, we haven't seen the plan, but we're not also asking to grade homework here. We want to make sure that whatever plan that they do brief us on does include protecting innocent civilians in that region.
Homework. We're not trying to check their homework. I mean, they can proofread themselves. This is a sociopathic way to speak about this genocide, and also to completely obscure the complicity of the United States. And so we're providing them with all of these materials, weaponry. I mean, Biden circumventing Congress. And you're saying that there's no review of how those weapons are supposed to be used? That is, by the way, a flagrant violation of the Leahy rule.
That's right. Yeah, that's exactly right. It's actually a violation of our own laws, not to mention any sort of morality or decency. I mean, listen, even if we weren't running diplomatic cover for them at the UN, running cover for them at the ICJ, expediting weapons shipments, providing billions in aid every single year, even if we weren't doing any of those things, we would still have a moral responsibility to try to do what we could to intervene to prevent genocide. We are signatories to the Genocide Convention, which obligates us to work to prevent genocide, not only, to keep us from aiding and abetting a genocide. So even if we weren't, but the fact that we are directly implicated here, and then she thinks she can just hand wave away. And I saw one of these other ghouls the other day say, oh, well, it's up to Israel. Of course, they can do whatever they want. What? I mean, it's sick.
It's a fiction, Crystal. First of all, it's a fiction that Israel is sovereign. I mean, it is our colonial outpost in the Middle East. Let's be real about the strategic value of it for the United States. It is a proxy state in many ways of the United States that has become incredibly radicalized. And then the other fiction that Palestinians are a sovereign, separate actor in this war, as opposed to people housed in a concentration camp. That's what Gaza is. They're concentrated in that area, not in the same way that the Holocaust concentration camps are, but in the way that other concentration camps have been executed throughout history. Like, they are concentrated in that place and they have nowhere to go. And they're not even a state that is able to bargain in the way that is being described. I mean, we're calling it a war, and it's just getting so frustrating for me because this is a trapped population that Israel completely controls every part of their life, every movement, the borders, land and sea. So this is not a war. This is a extermination of a population shooting fish in a barrel.
That's exactly right. It's a slaughter. It is not a war. It's a slaughter. And, with all this, even this conversation of, oh, well, what's your plan for Rafah? How are you going to protect the civilians in Rafah? Even that whole conversation is so bullshit. There's nowhere for these people. It's 1.3 million people. They've already been pushed out of Gaza City, pushed out of Khan Yunis. Many of these people have had to move some 6 different times, desperately searching in vain for safety. There is no plan that is going to protect those people outside of an immediate ceasefire, an immediate surge of aid. And even then, even if it stopped right now, and this is what it will never be over. Even if it stopped right now, the people who have managed to survive, they are going to have psychological and literal physical scars forever. These reports of kids as young as 5 going to doctors and saying they'd rather be dead. Yep. The little boy who laid down in the road to sleep because he hoped he would be run over after his family was killed. The damage has already been so horrific. But no, there's not going to be a plan to save the civilians in Rafah. The whole point is annihilation. The whole point is devastation. The whole point is destruction. I appreciate some of these psychotic right-wing voices like this lady who's like the minister of inclusion and
we played that
feminism
yesterday.
Or whatever the hell her title is.
Right.
And she says, I'm proud of the ruins of Gaza. I want the babies, their children, their grandchildren to tell them what the Jews did, which, by the way to implicate every Jew in the world in your monstrosity.
Exactly.
Talk about anti-Semitism. But I appreciate the honesty that comes from the right because they're upfront about, hey, we want to push these people out. We want them all gone. We want to resettle the Gaza Strip. Well, that is the policy of their government. And that's the policy our government is backing. So get rid of all these fictions and all these fantasies and all these fake debates that we're having about the quote unquote day after or the civilian plan for Rafah. This is all nonsense, distraction and bullshit. It's a distraction from the reality of what the real plan is, which is unfolding right now in front of all of our eyes.
Yeah, and Netanyahu is basically saying, and now has said multiple times publicly, that there's no option for a Palestinian state. Which, by the way, I agree with, because a one-state solution without barriers is actually the more realistic option because of how much territory Israel has seized. There's no real way for a Palestinian state to actually, without a ton of land back, to exist in a two-state reality. But what Netanyahu is saying publicly is, and many times over, flagrantly basically flipping off Biden, is that indefinite occupation after this, no Palestinian state, we will control the West Bank and we will control Gaza and we will resettle it is really what is going to happen. And that also just makes Biden look so weak that I don't understand why he doesn't understand how, the average person who isn't paying full attention to this, right? They just think he looks weak if they hear any of this. Why? We're the ones giving them billions of dollars. Why is Netanyahu telling him what to do?
You're not impressed by the leaks about, the tough conversations. They're having very tough conversations behind the scenes, very difficult conversations. He hung up on Netanyahu back in December. He called him an asshole. Yeah, he says he's a bad guy. Yeah, I think a lot of people, too, we did this focus group with RFK Jr. supporters. And listen, RFK Jr. is horrendous on Israel. So.
Yes, we played your questioning of him, which was great, actually, because he's even more Zionist than Biden.
Oh, my God. Yeah, if that's even possible. But in any case, we asked his supporters, what they thought about Israel. They were kind of unfamiliar with his views, but it was actually the two Black women in the group who had this very instinctive, which is, I think, a very normie reaction of we're funding this thing that's going on, which is really horrifying. And we see these things that are coming out and we got a lot of problems at home. Why aren't you focused on helping to make our lives better? And right. I do think that is, even outside of the morality of it and, the arguments that we think a lot about and, what's happening on the ground and our responsibility there. But there's also just this sort of independent normie instinct of, why are we so invested? Why is the Congress spending all their time trying to send money to Israel when we've got all these issues here at home? Not to mention, a poll just came out. Every single religious group in the country supports a ceasefire, including a majority of Jewish Americans support a ceasefire at this point. And then when you look at the Democratic base, the majority of the Democratic base says, yeah, it's a genocide. It's a genocide. Yep. Another 30% say it might be a genocide. We're not sure. Yep. So the American people, they are wildly at odds with what is being done in their name. And it just seems like we talk a lot about the preservation of democracy and saving democracy. It's like, where's the democracy on this? The message is loud and clear that people are horrified by these actions, and yet it doesn't seem to move the needle one bit.